The story kicked off in a juvenile prison somewhere in Thailand, a rough place where the country's most problematic kids inevitably ended up. A new teacher named Jess, full of idealistic hope, was just starting her new job there. In the art room one morning, her colleague Han gave her the rundown on a fresh batch of new arrivals. He pointed out 3 who were already infamous for their case. A heavyset kid named Tony, who was caught stealing from a general's house. A quiet boy named Steve, who had killed his own father. And the most notorious of the bunch, James, a repeat offender with a history of fighting and arson. Later that afternoon, after being processed, the new inmates were in the cafeteria when James had his first run-in with the local prison gang. Their leader and another gang member named Joe tried to push him around, but James, completely unfazed, was ready to throw down right then and there. The fight was broken up by guards before it could escalate. Afterwards, the head of the facility gave the new kids a welcome speech, encouraging them to reflect on their crimes. In the middle of the speech, Jess started a round of applause, which the rest of the kids joined in on, awkwardly cutting the warden's address short and hinting at some underlying tension. That night, the source of that tension became clear. After returning home, the head of the facility, revealed to be Jess's own mother, scolded her for the disruption. Their strained relationship, a casualty of her parents' divorce, was on full display as they argued. Later, alone in her room, Jess was scrolling through her phone when she found a message from her father. He was in Sapporo, Japan for the winter, and wrote about how much he missed her and wished she could visit. Seeing the message sparked a desperate desire in Jess to find a way to get there. Her solution came in the form of an international ice carving competition being held in Sapporo. Seeing it as a golden opportunity, she decided she would find a talented inmate and enter them in the contest. The next day, in art class, she held a small wood carving competition of her own, promising a reward for the best work. She dozed off for a bit, and when she woke up to check on the kids' progress, she found a stunningly detailed carving of a bird sitting on a table. Tony told her it was James who had made it, but he'd already left class. Jess, buzzing with excitement, ran to find him. She caught up with James and asked him how he was so skilled. He explained that his father had been a sculptor and had taught him everything he knew as a child. To see if the skill translated, Jess challenged him to carve something else, but this time with a block of ice. Hesitant at first, James quickly found his rhythm, his hands moving with a practiced confidence. In no time, he had carved an incredibly cute puppy face into the ice, leaving the rest of the class speechless. Seeing his undeniable talent, Jess pitched him her grand plan, which was to enter the ice carving competition in Japan, telling him she was certain he could win. But James immediately shut her down, feeling that a delinquent like him didn't deserve a shot at something so prestigious. Later that afternoon, Jess found James watering plants and tried again. She gave him a heart-to-heart, encouraging him to stop letting his past define him and to fight for a second chance to clear his name. She mentioned that his friend Tony had already volunteered to join the team. This finally broke through James's tough exterior, and he reluctantly agreed to participate. A few days later, Jess had to get the official green light for her ambitious plan. She put together a presentation for the prison officials, trying to get them to fund the team's trip to the competition in Japan. She sold them on the idea by appealing to their pride, framing it as a chance to bring international recognition and honor to the facility's name. The higher-ups were intrigued, but when it came time for the main event, a live sculpting demonstration, James was nowhere to be found. Just as the officials were getting impatient, James appeared and got straight to work. In front of the entire prison administration, James put on a masterclass, his hands moving with an elegance that defied his rough background. After a period of intense focus, Jess poured water over his work, and the sculpture was revealed. It was a stunning, intricately detailed bird made of pure ice. The officials were completely blown away by the beauty of his creation and agreed on the spot to fund the entire project. With the funding secured, they needed to round out their team. Jess invited Steve to join, and after a quick test where he skillfully carved a watermelon, it was clear he had a knack for it as well. The team then got its official name during a lighthearted moment in art class. While Han was filling out the registration forms, he had listed them as the Hot Boys. Jess protested, arguing that for an ice sculpting team, a name like Frozen Boys made more sense. Without missing a beat, Han just added the word to the front, and the Frozen Hot Boys were officially born. They still needed one more member, a designer. So Jess approached Joe, the artistic member of the rival prison gang. His gang leader immediately forbade him from joining, but Jess could see in Joe's eyes that he was interested. She simply told him to let her know if he changed his mind. That night, the rival gang made their feelings on the matter crystal clear. They cornered James, Tony, and Steve, and, without mercy, gave the three of them a severe beating. The assault became particularly grim when the gang leader ordered Joe to personally break Steve's hand, a brutal command meant to end their competition dreams for good. Faced with such a cruel order, Joe hesitated. This had gone too far. Luckily, guards arrived just in time to break up the attack before he had to make a choice. The three boys and Joe were taken to the infirmary to get patched up, their bodies bruised, but their spirits still intact. Jess rushed to the infirmary to check on her team. While she was tending to James's cuts, she asked him why he didn't fight back against the gang. Enduring the sting of the disinfectant, James explained that he was serious about changing his ways and was done with being the delinquent who solved every problem with his fists. His genuine desire to be better deeply touched Jess. After tending to James, she approached the conflicted Joe, who was also there, and quietly asked him again about her offer. Her kindness in the face of the gang's brutality was the final push he needed. Joe made up his mind and agreed to join the team. The next day, Jess introduced Joe as the team's official designer, and despite some initial protests from the guys he had just recently been forced to attack, Jess and Han managed to smooth things over. The Frozen Hot Boys team was finally complete. The following week, the day of the qualifying event arrived. The atmosphere was tense. The host introduced the three teams competing for the single ticket to represent their country in Sapporo. Two of the teams were from famous, well-funded schools and were met with loud cheers from the audience. But when the Frozen Hot Boys were introduced as being from a juvenile prison, a wave of silence and disdain washed over the crowd. The rules were simple. There were 2 rounds, the first on styrofoam and the second on ice, with the highest total score winning the trip. The Frozen Hot Boys were clearly the underdog. In the first round, Joe seemed to have a slow start, but he was meticulously laying out a complex design. Soon, the rest of the team kicked into high gear, and they quickly caught up. When time was up, they had created a completely improvised sculpture, a powerful, muscular statue with majestic wings. Jess watched from the sidelines, nervous that their abstract design was too risky, but the judge was unexpectedly blown away by the creativity and skill, awarding the Frozen Hot Boys the highest score of the round, leaving the crowd and the other teams completely stunned. In the second and final round of the qualifiers, the challenge was very specific. Each team had to sculpt a swan out of a block of ice, with the winner being the team whose creation had the longest, most elegant neck. When the time was up, the host brought out a tape measure and began checking the sculptures. The final measurements put the Frozen Hot Boys in second place, as the rival team from the prestigious school had managed a swan with a slightly longer neck. As the other team began to celebrate their apparent victory, Jess noticed something wasn't quite right with their statue. On a hunch, she walked up to it and gave the swan's neck a firm tap with a stick. The perfect sculpture was destroyed into pieces, revealing a hidden acrylic rod that had been used to support the impossibly long neck. Called out for cheating, the other team was immediately disqualified, and the Frozen Hot Boys were declared the official winners, punching their ticket to represent their country in Japan. The next day, the team began preparing for the freezing temperatures of Sapporo by training inside a large, refrigerated truck. In the middle of their practice session, Jess surprised them with custom-made team uniforms, solidifying their new identity with their team's name printed on them. But the surprise wasn't one-sided. The boys had also prepared a gift for her, a small, intricately carved keychain, a token of their gratitude. They were thankful that while most people saw them as nothing but criminals, she had given them a second chance to prove they could be something more. That night, the barriers between them truly came down. Gathered together, they began to open up, sharing the stories that had landed them in prison. Joe confessed that he had accidentally killed a friend while he was drunk. James followed, recounting the constant beatings from his alcoholic father after his mother died, which finally led to him fighting back. Steve then shared that he had killed his stepfather to stop the man from beating his mother. And finally, Tony explained that he only stole because his family was dirt poor and his mother had a gambling problem, leaving him with no other way to survive. The raw, honest confessions forged them into something more than a team. They became brothers. After hearing their stories, Jess gave each of them a letter, telling them that before they could leave for Japan, they had to go home one last time and ask for their parents' permission. The next morning at the airport, the team was swarmed by reporters. When one of them questioned the wisdom of sending delinquents to represent the country, Jess confidently defended her boys, explaining that they were just young men who had lost their way and deserved a chance to change. The interview was brutally interrupted when a woman stormed through the crowd, slapped Joe hard across the face, and began cursing him out. It was the mother of the friend he had accidentally killed. The public shaming was too much for Joe, and overwhelmed by guilt, he broke down and decided to quit the team. Jess gently pulled him aside, encouraging him to stay strong. She told him that while the past can never be erased, the future was still his to choose, and that true repentance was about moving forward. Her words got through to him, and a tearful Joe hugged her, agreeing to stay. A few hours later, the team arrived in Japan, and the sight of snow for the first time in their lives brought a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. The good mood, however, didn't last long for Jess. That night, she called her father to arrange a meeting, but he told her he was tied up with important business and couldn't see her until the next day, leaving her feeling deeply disappointed. The following morning, the team's spirits took another hit. They were watching a news report from back home about their upcoming competition. Instead of messages of support, the reporter interviewed citizens who were outraged that criminals were being sent to represent the country, with many worrying they would just run away. The news report then cut to an interview with James's father, who was covered in serious injuries. James fell silent as he was hit with the memory of what had happened when he went home to get his father's permission. The other night, while he was helping his father with a sculpture, the man had gotten drunk and flown into a baseless rage, attacking him. As James cried and begged him to stop, his father grabbed a knife and lunged at him. In a desperate act of self-defense, James pushed him away, causing the drunken man to fall and be crushed by a heavy statue. While James was lost in this traumatic memory, Han came in with a letter. It was from Jess. She had written to apologize, explaining that she had important business to attend to and wouldn't be able to accompany them to the competition later that day. The news of her apparent abandonment, coming on top of everything else, was the final straw. James, feeling betrayed and overwhelmed by disappointment, simply got up and walked out, leaving the team fractured just hours before the competition. When the main competition in Sapporo finally started, the rules were laid out for the 15 international teams. They had 3 days to transform a massive block of solid snow into a work of art. As the other teams eagerly began chipping away at their blocks, the Frozen Hot Boys were stuck in neutral. With James still missing, they could only sit and watch their precious time tick away. Tony, getting antsy, figured it was better to do something than nothing, and convinced the others they should try to find him. Meanwhile, James was wandering aimlessly through the city, still nursing his disappointment with Jess. He took out his frustration on an inflatable penguin balloon on the side of the road, giving it a swift kick, an act that unfortunately caught the eye of 2 passing police officers. When they approached him, he panicked and ran, sparking a chase through the streets of Sapporo. At the same time, Jess was finally having the reunion she had longed for, meeting up with her father. They shared a heartfelt hug, having not seen each other in a long time, and spent the afternoon catching up while making snowmen, a picture-perfect father-daughter moment. That evening, however, her dream fell apart. Over dinner at a restaurant, Jess asked him if it would be okay for her to stay with him in Japan. Her father suddenly went quiet. Just then, a woman and a young child approached their table, and her father introduced them as his new family. The final devastating blow came when her father, believing Jess couldn't understand Japanese, told his new wife that it was probably best not to invite Jess on their family outing to the zoo the next day because she wasn't really part of their family anymore. When his new stepdaughter spoke to Jess again, Jess replied in fluent Japanese, revealing that she had understood every single gut-wrenching word. Heartbroken, she excused herself and left. As Jess cried in the back of a taxi, processing the fact that the father she remembered was gone forever, a lost James had ended up at a quiet temple. There, an old woman kindly offered him some sweet potatoes she was selling. Due to the language barrier, James completely misunderstood her intentions, interpreting her kind offer as a passionate speech of encouragement, a sign from the universe telling him not to give up. Though it was just a misunderstanding, the old woman's perceived faith in him was enough to rekindle his fighting spirit. He thanked her profusely and walked away with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to find his way back. His journey back to the hotel led him right into the path of the two police officers who had been chasing him all day. At the same time, Han, Steve, Joe, and Tony, who had been searching for him, also spotted him and gave chase. Just as James managed to escape the police officer's pursuit, someone grabbed his shoulder from behind. It was Jess. She asked him why he had run off, and he told her everything. Feeling immense guilt for abandoning her team, she hugged him tightly and apologized. The rest of the team soon caught up, and they all came together in a group hug, their fractured bond finally repaired. The moment was interrupted by the two policemen, but as Han was about to try and buy them some time, Jess shouted, asking why they were being chased. The police explained it was all a simple misunderstanding. They had received a report about a missing team member from Thailand, and James matched the description. With apologies all around, the ordeal was finally over. Arriving back at the competition venue, they saw that the other teams were already halfway done. With no time to waste, Jess rallied her team, telling them that just like the mythical phoenix, they would rise from the ashes of their past. This became the inspiration for their sculpture. The next day, the Frozen Hot Boys worked furiously to catch up. Their phoenix began to take shape, but disaster struck when a piece of the sculpture's base broke off while Tony was carving. The team worried the whole thing would collapse, and they didn't have time to start over. James, stepping up as a leader, calmly suggested they reinforce the foundation first before continuing with their design, a plan they quickly put into action. On the final day of the competition, their phoenix sculpture was nearly complete and was drawing amazed looks from passers-by. As the team was putting on the finishing touches, a group of 3 Thai tourists stopped to admire their work. Blown away by the detail and artistry, they began to cheer the boys on. Hearing words of encouragement in their own language from people from their own country was a deeply moving experience for the team. After being looked down on for so long, they finally felt a sense of pride and support. That feeling was amplified by the knowledge that, miles away, Jess's mother and all the other inmates at the prison were gathered around a TV, watching and cheering for them as well, rooting for their underdogs to succeed. With the last of the details in place, the phoenix sculpture created by the Frozen Hot Boys was finally finished. It was a masterpiece. But just as they were stepping back to admire their work, a strong gust of wind whipped through the venue, and one of the massive wings cracked, nearly collapsing. The team scrambled, frantically patching up the damage in the final moments before the deadline. They managed to stabilize it just in time. When the judges made their final assessment, however, it was decided that the team from China had taken first place, leaving the Frozen Hot Boys with an honorable second. Despite not winning the top prize, there was no sense of defeat among them. James, looking at their incredible creation, said he was still incredibly proud of what they had accomplished together, having gone from delinquents to official representatives of their country on an international stage. Later, as the team walked across a bridge, taking in the beautiful sunset, James grew quiet in contemplation. It turned out that this day was not just the end of the competition. It was also his 18th birthday. The milestone was a bittersweet one. Jess had to break the heavy news to him that now that he was legally an adult, his punishment for the incident with his father would be re-evaluated under the much harsher laws for adults. His father had pressed charges, and there was no avoiding it. The police would be waiting for him back in Thailand on charges of severe assault. But James, no longer the angry kid who ran from his problems, refused her offer to help get the sentence reduced. He was ready to accept whatever punishment was coming his way. Their return to Thailand was a world away from their departure. Instead of scorn, they were greeted at the airport by a crowd of supportive journalists, celebrating them as national heroes. Jess's mother was there as well, and she told her daughter how incredibly proud she was of her and the entire team. Hearing those words from her mother was a deeply moving moment for Jess, healing a rift that had existed between them for years. The warm welcome was soon interrupted by the solemn arrival of several police officers. Seeing them, James knew his time was up. He walked towards them without hesitation and let them do their job, holding out his wrists to be handcuffed before being led away. 2 years passed. The juvenile prison was filled with new faces, and Jess's relationship with her mother had fully healed. Somewhere else, in a quiet graveyard, Joe was seen paying his respects to the friend he had accidentally killed. As he was about to leave, his friend's mother passed by him. In the silence, she simply told him to live his life well, a quiet act of forgiveness that brought Joe to tears. Later that afternoon, the Frozen Hot Boys gathered in front of the prison. It was a special day. They were all there. Tony, Steve, and Joe sharing shaved ice and waiting. Soon, the prison gates opened and James walked out, finally a free man. As he took his first breath of fresh air, his friends mobbed him, playfully throwing their shaved ice at him in celebration. James, seeing his friends had come to welcome him back, was overwhelmed with happiness. They all came together in a group hug, their journey as the Frozen Hot Boys finally complete as they headed home together.